Okay.
If you can read the title slide, and I'm assuming you all can, tonight's topic is a life of caring. Before we get into tonight's topic, I am going to be out next week. So I'm still looking for a sub. Last week, I think I asked for a courageous volunteer. This week, I'll take any volunteer whatsoever. So, courage is optional. But I do need a sub for next week. So see me after class, and we'll talk about it. I'll give you some material to get you started, and then anything else you want during the week, I'm here for you. So. Caring is action based on the Greek word agape, which is the love that seeks the highest good of another. This is the word, agape is the word that describes God's love for us, and it's supposed to be reflected in our love for Him and for each other. For review, character is the set of traits that makes us distinctive. Our character is who we are when no one else is looking. Our goal is to develop a godly character. That's one of the reasons why His agape should be reflected in the way that we live and treat each other and relate to Him. And as Christ's disciples, we are learning to imitate His character. Same principle for agape there. Developing this character will be a challenge, and it will require a commitment on our part. We've talked about both of those in previous classes. The reward will be worth the effort. And I do kind of want to mention this. As I've gotten older, the idea of being rewarded's not a bad thing. I think when I was younger, I thought, well, why would you do anything for a reward? And as I've gotten older and more practical, it says, why would you do anything if it didn't produce a reward? It should be something in it for you. Last week, we looked at cheerfulness or rejoicing, and this is the state of being happy or optimistic. Cheerfulness requires 3 skills: to not be anxious, to depend upon God, and gratitude. And most people have to learn at least one of these skills. Most of us have to learn all 3 of them. It's something that we acquire, through experience and through devotion and effort and things like that. Get those, and that will lead to this optimistic outlook. No one can or should be cheerful 100% of the time. Sometimes when we think about this, well, as things are driving me nuts right now, or I'm feeling bad or something like that, well, I must be wrong. Well, nobody can be cheerful 100% of the time or optimistic. There are times to feel the negative emotions: fear, pain, anger, sorrow, what have you. But cheerfulness is the place we want to live. You go home every night to your house, and you will leave the house for other things, but you always come back home, unless you're crashing on your cousin's couch or something like that. But you really want to get back home. So that's where we're going to live. That's going to be the state that we want to live in. Okay, any questions or comments before we get into tonight's topic? Okay. Caring is love in action. Often we associate caring with an emotional response, but it is shown by what it does. And the way we typically use caring in our language and the way that we relate to each other is we talk about somebody who cares about something deeply or has a passion for something. Have a passion for a career, or you have that coworker, or you are that coworker that cares a great deal about quality control. That's a good thing to have in a coworker, or to have in your own professional arsenal, is to care deeply about it. One of the things, though, that kind of comes along with that is, why do you care so deeply about quality control? Usually it's because you've seen what happens when you don't care about quality control. That's experience teaching you a very valuable lesson about that. So in professional life and other relationships and things like that, we care about these things in part because of practical experience. Now, in the context of this class, caring is the motivation and the product of agape love, the love that seeks the highest good for another. If I'm going to seek your highest good, I need to be at least somewhat aware of your circumstances. I need to be somewhat aware maybe of what obstacles you're facing or something like that in order to be able to provide some sort of assistance on that. But I also need to want to. There's a word that's going to pop up a little bit later on in our class tonight. It's the word mercy. Go ahead and bookmark that in your brain or wrap it around your finger, because that's a really important concept when it comes to this idea of caring. And we're going to touch on that just a little bit later on. Interesting thing about agape is, according to 1 Corinthians 13, 1 and 2, without love, we are nothing. We are noise, we are wasted effort, we are a lot of things, but we are nothing as a result of it. And then according to James 2, 15 through 17, which we're going to look at later as well, without an active response to a need, James says our faith is dead. If you see the need and you do not respond to it in agape with the motivation of taking care of that need, our faith is dead. It's not producing any of the works that it ought to be, and so it's not a living faith. Questions or comments? So there's a whole lot more going on into this particular word, I think, than maybe we think about it casually. It's kind of important that we learn how to do this gracefully. Our theme verse is found in Matthew chapter 22, verses 36 through 40. You're all familiar with this passage. It says, a lawyer comes up and asks Jesus this question in verse 36. He says, "Teacher, which is the great commandment? Which is the great commandment in the law?" And he, Jesus, said to him, "You shall love the Lord your God with all your heart and with all your soul, with all your mind." Love there is agape. This is the great and foremost commandment. The second is like it. You shall love your neighbor as yourself. On these two commandments depend the whole law and the prophets. Now, what's interesting about that is you go back into Exodus chapter 20 and you look at the 10 commandments, or is it 12? 10. No, it's not 10. I know it's not. 20, yeah. If you look at the 10 commandments, neither of those are given there. But he says they all depend upon these two concepts. So there's like 700 edicts and laws in the law of Moses and things like that, and they all depend upon these two things. And so the principle there is, first and foremost, love God. Second, then you love your neighbor as yourself. Now, if you're going to love your neighbor as yourself, how do you have to feel about yourself? You do have to love yourself, don't you? And honestly, hating your neighbor as you hate yourself is probably not a real good strategy for anybody. Or, demean your neighbor as you demean yourself. No, it's you love yourself because that's the right thing to do. You're in the image of God, but so is your neighbor, and you're not going to ignore the needs of your neighbor, whatever those needs turn out to be. So, questions or comments?
That would be the agape love for yourself.
Exactly. Yeah. Yes, that is the seeking the highest good of yourself. And that's a very different decision, isn't it, than what makes you feel good? Yeah. That's an understanding that there's a place for me to fit in, and there's a place for me to have my needs met and things like that, because it's in my highest good. It's loving myself as a reflection of the way that God loves me, respecting myself the way that God respects me. That's a good point. Thank you for bringing that up. So, from Matthew 22, our first and highest love, agape, belongs to God. Love our neighbors as we love ourselves. To stop at loving only ourselves is selfishness. We're all familiar with the concept of it because we've all done it. If you've raised kids, you've dealt with it constantly. Turns out if you're raising grandkids, you're dealing with it constantly. You know, it's exhibited in all of this because we haven't got them all, you know, got them all growing out of that type of behavior. The nature of selfishness. Definitions are regard for one's own interest or advantage with disregard of the interest of others. So what's in my best interest? Usually we have a pretty clear picture what that is. What's in my best interest versus what's in your best interest? I don't care. See, it's in my best interest here. That's the one that matters to me. And if I have to steamroll you over to get it, then I'm going to be selfish and do that. That's, you know, that's almost a Darwinian approach to relationships there, survival of the fittest kind of a thing. Devoted to caring only for oneself or influenced chiefly by one's own interest. So you get a very clear sense here that this is a very possessive view of my own interest or your own interest to the exclusion of anybody else's. I mean, we're okay if, you know, maybe my best interest and yours kind of align, maybe we can kind of work together, but when there's conflict out of there, which one are we going to choose? You know, when there's a need there and one need is stronger than the other, which one are we going to choose? Well, if you're selfish, you already know the answer to that. The nature of unselfishness. Caring or showing concern for others. Do other people have needs? Kind of the common point of the human condition, isn't it? And they vary from time to time. You know, somebody loses a loved one, or somebody has a problem, health problem, or something like that. We kind of need to know how that feels to it, and we kind of need to be willing to step in and do for them the things that they may not be able to do in that particular condition. We have to invest ourselves in this relationship. That's showing concern for others, or to put others' interests ahead of our own interest. That's a hard thing to do. Have you ever seen a 4-year-old do it? Very rarely you will. I mean, sometimes they actually are graceful enough to and they put you to shame when they do it too, don't they? You know, but most of the time when you're dealing with children, they do have a very clear understanding of their interest, maybe not so much yours or anybody else's, but they do understand their own. And in fact, just like we try to teach our children courtesy and gratitude, we also try to teach them to share. And that produces all kinds of problems when they're trying to grasp the concept of it. So there's the toy, here it is. You know, when children look at something that they have and something like that, you know, this is my stuff. If I give it to you, I won't have any stuff. That's, you know, very crystal clear how they see it. And so we have to teach them, share the toy, you know, let them take a turn with it. And they, you know, they do the other things there, which is, you grab the toy and then they come running over. No, it's my toy. I got to have it. And you pick something else up. No, that's my toy. I got to have it. Well, you can't have them all. They're all mine. I got to have it. You know, they kind of have to learn that lesson there. Or the one that works in reverse is that they grab the toy and go prance around in front of you and I've got the toy and you don't. We got dogs that play that game with bones in our house, and they kind of get in the bone and sit in the middle of the living room and start growling because I've got the bone. You can't have it. I tell them to hush, and then they don't hush, and I go get the bone and put it someplace where they can't get to it. So now I have the bone. So children have a very simplistic view of this thing. We as adults, we have a much more sophisticated view of this idea of not sharing. Typically, if we don't want to share, nobody ever comes out and says, you know, the reason I don't want to meet your needs or I don't really want to, you know, do what you want me to do or cooperate with you in any way is because I'm hard-hearted and selfish and I don't like you. Nobody ever says that very often. Instead, the way we go about it is says, you know, you're in this predicament because you're short-sighted or you're lazy or you're, you know, you won't take care of yourself. And now you want to run around again and expect me to take care of you again. And if I do that, I'm just enabling your behavior. So I'm not going to help you. What did I just say? If you boil it down, I just said, this is my stuff. If I give you my stuff, I won't have it. But I made you feel bad about it. I'm not trying to blame it on you because that's the way it works. And that's kind of an important thing for us to recognize. A lot of times when we're blaming somebody else for something, are we really being, truthful about that? Or are we just trying to get out of doing what we ought to be doing in order to meet their need? I also want to emphasize there is a big difference between being selfish and having a legitimate self-interest. Every human being in here has a legitimate self-interest. Every human being on the planet has a legitimate self-interest. Being selfish is focusing on one's own needs and desires to the exclusion of anyone else's. Self-interest is providing for one's own legitimate needs. We have these legitimate needs. Self-interest is stewardship. There's several parables that are in the Bible talking about stewardship. You will give an account for the time, and the parable of the talents and what have you. Stewardship is we take care of ourselves as much as possible so that we can serve God and others. Now, an example that I hope you're all comfortable with, what's the value of Bible study? We do a lot of it, don't we? What's the value of it? Wow, it's not valuable at all? We get knowledge out of this, right? We get to look at what God's character is like, what Christ's character is like, what our character needs to be like to do, to please them, to be like them. And so hopefully, based upon that Bible study, we grow and we become more like them. The purpose of Bible study is not to become a more intellectual, smarter sinner. It is to become more like Christ. And this is the thing that teaches us how to do that. And it's work. It's an investment. That's stewardship. That's us investing in us so that we can be a better servant. And so that's the value of it. Same thing kind of works at a relationship level. We invest in these relationships because it's good for us, it's good for them. And it makes us both more like Christ and like God. Questions or comments? Traits of a life of caring. This is how we should think about others. In Philippians 2, verses 3 and 4, do nothing from selfishness or empty conceit. If we could just get that part down, that first phrase right there, that's going to clean up a lot of relationship problems right there. Do nothing from selfishness or empty conceit, but with humility of mind, let each of you regard one another as more important than himself. That's a hard thing to do. That's a hard lesson to learn. Kind of have to start with maybe I can just regard you as good as I am or as important as I am, but he goes a little bit more beyond that. And that, do not look out merely for your own personal interests, which are legitimate interests, but also for the interests of others. So that's relationship awareness in the sense that now I'm paying attention to what's going on for you, the way that you're paying attention to what's going on for me and for everybody else around you, so that if a need erupts, that we can be there to help. Because one of the things about needs is sometimes we can't take care of them ourselves. Major illnesses and things like this, these things happen, and we can't do it on our own, and so we're going to need a little bit of help, and we need to be aware of the opportunities to do that. Caring reflects Christ's care for us. In 1 John 3, 16 through 18, we know love by this, that he laid down his life for us. Talking about Christ there. Does that prove that he loved us? Absolutely. Absolutely it proves it. That's like the ultimate proof right there that he laid down his life for us. And we ought to lay down our lives for the brethren. Hold that thought. But whoever has the world's goods and beholds his brother in need and closes his heart against him, how does the love of God abide in him? So there's the proof of the caring, isn't it? Little children, let us not love with word or with tongue, but in deed and truth. Telling somebody that we love them is useful. Showing somebody that we love them is better, and it gives power to the words, when we say them. Now, that thought I wanted you to hold on to, in verse 16, I don't think John is telling us that we ought to be running around looking for ways to die for each other. There's another way to lay down our life for the brethren, and that's to spend it in their service. So that takes a whole lot longer than just dying, and it's a whole lot less painful. But it's also a whole lot more essential too, and at least for us it is. Now, I wouldn't discount it if that of a situation, very rare that it may be, were to come up where that might be a necessity to be willing to do it, but he's not talking about just, under these rare circumstances, go ahead and die for your brothers or your family or something like that, but spend your life in their service is what I think he's talking about here. Any questions or comments?
What you mentioned is a little more difficult.
Yeah.
You can lay down your life for somebody without thinking about it,
Mm-hmm.
sacrificing yourself for somebody else. This laying down involves
Yeah.
thinking and, making a decision.
Yeah. It's a conscientious decision. Agape is a conscientious decision. It's a choice that we're making. So that's a good point. Anything else? Bob?
When I was overseas in the infantry, our chaplain, at every service he would say, no better love than to lay down your life for others. That kind of softened our, thinking, we protect each other, and some did. Some would go in harm's way to protect, but hearing that, he was always telling us that in every service we had.
Yeah, that's one of the circumstances where that might literally be true, right, in that particular point. And in fact, part of your basic training is that they're kind of conditioning you to be able to do that in an instant without thinking. Any other thoughts or comments? Okay. Caring reveals our faith. James chapter 2, 15 through 17. If a brother or sister is without clothes and in need of daily food, and one of you says to them, go in peace, be warmed and be filled, and yet you do not give them what is necessary for their body, what use is that? Even so, faith, if it has no works, is dead, being by itself. I always found a little bit of irony in verse 16 in this whole idea of go in peace, be warmed and filled, and not actually doing anything. Sometimes we use the phrase, well, I can't do anything for you right now, but you have my moral support. Yeah. Great, I can make a coat out of moral support, or I can get a meal from moral support. That really meets my needs and makes me feel good. No, it doesn't. I mean, somebody says something like that, to me, that's the first thing inclination I get out of that, you're blowing me off, aren't you? I'm not getting anything out of you, whatever the need is there, but you're trying to, placate your own sense of value or your own selfishness by at least trying to make a half-hearted attempt to not say no, I don't really want to. But that's, it doesn't matter. It's kind of a useless gesture to do that. So, don't say, do. Or if you do say, do. Another point to keep in mind here about caring is we will be judged by how we care. Matthew 25, 31 through 46 is a long passage. I'm not going to read it all to you tonight because we got a clock ticking back there. But this is Jesus talking to his disciples, and he talks about the passage standing before God's throne in judgment, and he says we got the sheep on the one side and the goats on the other. And Matt's not here, is he? By the way, from the perspective of, he always calls you guys over here, us guys over here, the goats. From the perspective of the judge, this is the sheep. You guys are the goats. Sheep, goats, yeah. But he's talking about judgment. They're standing before the judgment throne of God, and they're being judged. And the two passages out of this thing I want to highlight for you, first of all, are verses 35 and 36. This is him speaking to the goats, the goat side. He says, for I was hungry, and you gave me something to eat. I was thirsty, and you gave me drink. I was a stranger, and you invited me in. Naked, and you clothed me. I was sick, and you visited me. I was in prison, and you came to me. You remember what the goats said after, or the sheep said after that? When? When did we see you in any of these conditions and meet your needs? And Christ says, when you did it to the least of these, you did it to me. Now you skip down just a few verses here, 42 and 43. For I was hungry, and you gave me nothing to eat. I was thirsty, and you gave me nothing to drink. I was a stranger, and you did not invite me in. Naked, and you did not clothe me. Sick and in prison, and you did not visit me. It's almost exactly the same thing, isn't it? Except I highlighted the words that are the important words that are different. Nothing, nothing, not, not. And of course, they come along. The goats say, well, when did we see you in this condition and we didn't deal with it? He says, when you didn't do it. You didn't do it to me. So is this an actual view of what judgment's going to look like? I honestly don't know. This feels more like a parable or an allegory to me. But the important thing is he's telling us here, this is an aspect of your judgment. How did you treat each other? So, we're going to be judged by, this is really a part of our stewardship as Christians, doing these things when we see this particular need, is investing ourselves in others to take care of their need. So, and that's going to be an important part of the judgment. That's also going to be part of our reward. So there's that reward word again that I seem to be liking so much now that I've gotten older. Any questions or comments? Yes.
I think a lot of caring is seeing what the needs for caring are. Because while caring is a decision and active, often not caring is more passive. It's not what they did here, it's what they didn't do.
Yeah.
They weren't looking for opportunities to be caring for others. And so they asked, when did we not do those things? Mm-hmm. Because they didn't see the needs. And so many people hurting others is not an act of malice, but is them just simply living on automatic and not thinking about, wait a minute, the way I live my life impacts other people.
Yeah, that's a really good point. The idea of being awareness, and it is really easy to get focused on what's immediately in front of us and not do that and not see those particular needs. And so I think that's a good point, to raise our own spiritual awareness. Don?
Yeah, I don't know why this became important to me a long time ago. Leviticus 25 verses 35 and on, where it says that many of your fellow Israelites become poor and are unable to support themselves among you, help them as you would a foreigner and stranger, so that they continue to live among you. Do not take interest or any profit from them, but fear your God, so that they may continue to live among you. You must not lend them money at interest or sell them food at a profit.
Yeah, even under the law of Moses, it was actually baked into it, wasn't it? That pay attention to the needs of others and deal with them fairly.
Right. Especially your brothers.
Yeah. Any other questions, comments? Ken?
Yeah, I was just thinking of this point earlier. Galatians, talks about if you have therefore opportunity, so you are seeking for those opportunities. And then there's a distinction between the emotion and the action, as you've already pointed out. But 1 Corinthians says you can do all these things and not have love, and it doesn't profit you anything. Or you don't. So you can love somebody, then it means and implies that you look out for their highest good. And also, it just seems like you can also not love somebody. Like, you can do all these things for your spouse, you can do all these things for your children, but if you don't do it out of love, I mean, the both, go hand in hand is all I'm trying to say. And you don't pick and choose either. I can't say, I love so-and-so, but I don't love that brother or sister. We have to love everybody within the body. And I know Jesus, with the woman that was washing his feet, the people were starting to say, well, does he not even know who that woman is? And so, you know, our love is to be extended to all of our brothers and sisters and to those that we have the opportunity to help as we're seeking.
You got your flashlight on
Yeah,
your
I know, that's an
phone.
accident.
Tim?
One that always hits me pretty hard is James 4:17. So to him who knows to do good and does it not,
Damn it, it's sin.
it is
Yeah.
sin.
Yeah. That's a true statement, isn't it? Yeah. Anything else? We will be blessed in our caring. This is from Luke chapter 6, verses 36 through 38. Be merciful just as your Father is merciful. And do not judge, and you will not be judged. And do not condemn, and you will not be condemned. Pardon, and you will be pardoned. Give, and it will be given to you. Good measure, pressed down, shaken together, running over. They will pour into your lap. For by your standard of measure, it will be measured to you in return. Remember when I mentioned that word mercy early on? In verse 36, be merciful just as your Father is merciful. Mercy comes from a word that basically indicates, number one, a desire to help, and number two, the ability to help. So it is possible, because we are human beings, to be in a situation where we might have the desire to help, but not the ability to help. Example, serious illness. Not my specialty. You know, if you ever need to have an appendix taken out, don't come to me. You know, you have to have a medical license and all of these other kinds of things, because it's important that you have the right skill set to do it, and I don't. So, might want to help, might not have the ability to help. Or what seems to be more of a problem for most people is we have some ability or an ability to help, but we don't have the desire. God's not limited on either one of those things, the ability or the desire. And that's what he is doing. And so to the best of our ability, be merciful, because that's what the Father does. Verse 37 in this passage always kind of puzzled me about, you know, we're talking about being merciful and then give, and then right in the middle is don't judge, don't condemn, and pardon and you'll be pardoned. And I think at least part of the reason this might be in there is, remember the example I used earlier about, you know, I may not want to help you, but I'm not going to come out and tell you that's because I don't like you and I'm selfish or anything like that. So I'm going to concoct a reason why I'm not going to help you. You remember what I said? That was pretty judgmental, wasn't it? It was actually judgmental in the sense that unless you actually knew who I was talking about, or there was somebody specific, you could kind of conclude I'd being pretty judgy in that thing, and that's why I'm not helping you. But that wasn't the motivation at all. I just didn't want to do it. I just didn't want to feel bad about not doing it. I wanted to make it your fault. So it's good advice for us to be very careful how you judge, be very careful how you condemn. And then in verse 38, you know, the idea of give and it will be given to you, good measure, pressed down, shaken together, running over. You ever go into like a feed store or buy something in bulk or something like that? You know, you always want to buy from the person that packs it in there really, really good, don't you? You know, because you really want to get your money's worth out of it. Well, that's kind of what he's talking about here. But by your standard of measure, it will be measured to you in return. So if I am willing to help like an eyedropper full, you know, a couple of drops here, a couple of drops there, and things like that, what's verse 38 is telling me I'm going to get in return? A couple of drops here, a couple of drops there. What if I'm willing to invest whatever it is that you need? You know, I will make sure that you get it as long as I can, you know, as long as I can provide it. That's a different standard, isn't it? That's a different set of generosity, and that's what he's telling us there. And really, it's going to take the same faith to believe that, isn't it? A faith that we're going to require over time and experience and from studying the Word of God. This is the one that's teaching us, and now we've got to learn to believe it to the point that that's the way we're going to act. And that's a bit of a challenge. Don?
Matt used that example in his lesson Sunday evening. We talked in James 2, verse 13. Or it says, because judgment without mercy will be shown to anyone who has not been merciful, mercy triumphs over judgment.
Absolutely.
And that's kind of the same line as this.
Okay, any other thoughts or comments? How convenient. Okay, we're done with this class. Still looking for a teacher, so if you're interested in doing it, this would be a really good time to speak up. Thank you. I haven't done it yet. Yeah. Thank you. I appreciate that.